Welcome back to the Military Retirement Podcast. Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday. Hope you're enjoying your Sunday with your family and friends. Maybe you're watching this on a TV, which would be excellent. That's really cool. I like the fact that you can actually watch this on TV. It's pretty neat. And it seems like a lot of you in the audience who watch this on TV. So we appreciate that. We really, really appreciate your time and having you here with us. And we try to give you as much great information as we can to help you better get through your journey. Today, we have a special guest host with us, Mr. Steve, aka Navy Cop. He's our moderator in the chats during the live streams when he's around. And yeah, Vic's out. He's doing some stuff with the family. So Steve is here with us. Welcome, Steve.
Appreciate it, John.
Appreciate you being here, man. You're really helping us out a lot. We appreciate your time, hanging out in the chats and moderating things in the chats, which is really probably not a whole lot of stuff right now, but it's a good start to have somebody available to do that, because I know it'll get out of hand at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really
I'm just waiting for those residual checks to show up, so it's all good.
As soon as we hit the lottery, we will send you your check, sir. Yeah. So yeah, anything you got going on your end you want to share with us?
Not a lot. Honestly, I follow the podcast because of the fact that I'm older and significantly underemployed, so I'm getting a lot of good information from you guys regardless. And
great.
You hit 56 and the interviews stop coming, and you try and figure yourself out, but also a lot of the information is helping me as I, try and develop some of my stuff and see what I can do to help fellow vets moving forward as well. So.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we appreciate you, and it's glad to hear that directly. We get it in the comments back and forth. We get it in the Facebook group back and forth, but it's nice to hear it in person once in a while. It's good that we're actually helping people and getting people through whatever it is they need to get through. And you're a perfect example. You've been retired for a few years already and still dealing with transition and civilian life and figuring things out. So it's not an easy process. It's not a fast process. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time than others. Sometimes it's quick and fast for other people. It just depends on you as an individual. And I think that's really a testament to one of the reasons why we do this, and we put our effort into it and put our hearts and souls into it, and our time and time away from family and that kind of stuff. So we really appreciate that. I do want to bring up a couple things, and these are tech related things for those people in the audience who might be looking at some tech stuff, getting ready to transition out. If you're looking for tech stuff, two things specifically. So the first one I'll bring up is the Google Veteran Career Week. You got about 22 days left to register. It starts on June 10th, and this basically preps you for IT type stuff, Google things. Here's some of the agenda for you. They'll have a fireside chat, do some industry panels and some training breakouts. So if you're looking to break into tech, or if you've done tech for a while and you want to just sharpen up some skills or add some things to your resume, this is a great way to do it. Things like this, I think Amazon does one like this as well. So if you're trying to get tech things on your resume, or you're trying to go down that path of tech, this is one really good way to do that and get it kickstarted. And just to be in the room, just to be in the conversation with people who are actually doing this stuff. Find out if it's something for you. Like, this is a great test bed if you're trying to figure out, hey, maybe I want to do IT work get around these folks and hang out with them for a couple days in this career week, and you can figure some of that out and understand before you start diving down that path initially. So it's a great thing. Second one I want to bring up is a thing about drones and drone technology. I know it's starting to become a really big thing. I just saw a news article the other day about the Army trying to get away from the old machinery that we use, the old Humvees and things of that nature that we've been using for years and years and years. We're trying to get away from that antiquated vehicular technology and move into some more autonomous things like drones. But not only that, drones, the drone industry itself, again, this is very tech related because you're using some super, super high tech stuff when you're doing this job and using these tools. So the drone industry is an industry that's growing and growing and growing for a multitude of reasons. One reason would be disaster recovery. If there's like a hurricane or something comes through, it's kind of natural disaster. Drone technology is what they use to do surveys of the area, aerial visual, to look for people, to find out where gas leaks are, like those kinds of things. They use this kind of technology heavily. I was just in Augusta, Georgia last year, and we had a huge storm come through, tons of tornadoes, all the same night, knocked out power for weeks. People that have water, gas lines were busted. And these drones were everywhere, surveying things, checking things out, making sure people are okay, trying to find out what the problems are. And so this is a great thing. So the website look for the company is called Bets to Drones. So it's teach you technology, teach you how to use drones, how to fly drones. I believe there is a part in there where you can get the FAA certification to be able to then fly drones legally within certain airspace within the United States, at least. So if you're looking at something like that, this can also turn into a really cool hobby because you can do this professionally as a job with a company, and you could also do it on the side if you wanted to do like aerial photography, or if you wanted to do like drone photography or drone video making or something like that. If that's something that's up your alley, this is definitely something to take a look at. And the last thing I want to talk about is, of course, we created a book, and I don't know if you've checked it out or read it or not, but basically it's 10 short chapters about what to think about when you're starting to get to that point where you want to get out of the military, you want to retire, or you want to get out after a few years of being in service. Some of the things to keep in mind, such as where to live, how to find a job, resume hunting, education, things of that nature, is all contained in this short little book. It's about 80 something pages, 86 pages in the print version. And right now it's only available online on Amazon as an ebook on Kindle. If you have Amazon Unlimited, as you can see, I have Amazon Unlimited. So I've got you can read it for free, basically. I just ordered the print proofs to take a look at, go over them, see what they look like, and see if we can go ahead and then push the print version of this, because I feel like some people like that more tactile feel of having a physical book. And this would be a nice little pocket book to carry around to read when you're bored, if you've got nothing to do, you got some downtime, or if you're, commuting or whatever, and you're not driving, of course. This is a great little thing to have. And plus, I want to have a bunch of them on me so I can hand them out here locally to folks that I bump into, because I bump into folks all the time who are getting ready to retire and get out of the military. So I want to have a few copies on myself in my backpack so that I can hand those out to people whenever the conversation comes up. But keep your eyes out if you're looking for the print version. I believe that will be available very, very soon. I'm going to check the proofs, make sure everything looks cool. If I need to make any edits or anything like that, I'll do that. And then we will get that available, and we'll let you know when it's available online to order from Amazon. And every sale that comes from those books goes directly back into the podcast. Everything we do goes directly back into the podcast and supporting the podcast and the Facebook community and the community at large, the newsletter and all that stuff that we do. So yeah, that's basically what I've got for intro notes. And with that, I think we're going to very briefly here in a moment jump into our guest for the day, Mr. Carlos Gallardo. He is a retired Marine veteran, and he's working as an HR professional now. And we're going to dig into his story, dig into some of the pitfalls and the trenches and the peaks and the valleys, and some insights on the transition process, figuring out your tribe, things of that nature. So let me bring Carlos up to the stage. Hey, Carlos.
Hey, good morning, John. Good morning, Steve.
Morning.
Welcome to the show. I love your backdrop, by the way. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually outdoors at Saddleback College. Brought my son to a driving course, so it happens to be hosted here, and I couldn't think of a better way to, spend my Sunday morning than, be outdoors here at Saddleback College and hanging out with the two of you.
Nice. So, yeah, welcome to the show. This is the show. We do the little short intro, then we get into your story a little bit. I just want to dive into real quickly as a kind of a bookend, your military service, and then your first thoughts of getting out of service, what you were kind of going through mentally when you were getting ready to cross the threshold of retirement or deciding to retire.
Yeah, so by way of a very brief introduction, I enlisted in the Corps back in the late 90s, and, spent a lot of time kind of crisscrossing the country, if you will. My first duty station was 8th Communication Battalion in North Carolina, and then I ended up in Naval Air Station Lemoore. From there, I ended up at the Anchorage MEPS. Shortly thereafter, when 9/11 happened, I found myself back at Camp Pendleton for my first assignment at the MEF headquarters group. Spent some time in Iraq, and then came back and decided that the Corps isn't challenging enough. So I decided that I'd give back and became a drill instructor through the influence of my battalion sergeant major at the time and a couple other Marines that I was deployed with. Somehow everybody decided that we were going to go be drill instructors together, right? And spent some time there at the depot, training recruits, producing basically trained Marines, as you say down there at the depot. But then after that, moved around a little bit more, ended up in 29 Palms, deployed a couple of times with 3-7 to Afghanistan. And then, eventually was selected Star Major, ended up at the depot. And then I actually ended up retiring at the depot as the battalion sergeant major of Support Battalion. When it was all said and done, I ended up spending 23 years active duty in the Corps. It was a very scary decision. I think all of us that have transited, especially, like, there's no right time, right? Because when you spend 23 years in the Corps, you think, man, if I had only spent 4 in the Corps, it would have been super easy, gone out, gone to college, done X, Y, and Z, and I'd be okay now. So I was almost kind of regretting spending, a 23-year span in the Corps, because I thought to myself, it is actually much more difficult to transition after 23 years, regardless of the benefits that you're intending to receive. Because, you think about it, right? Was I 42 years old at the time when I retired, and I still I have 3 sons and a spouse. So, she and I were talking about, college, et cetera. So, you're almost thinking to yourself, do I stick around for another 7 years in the Corps and pull 30 and retire in my early 50s, or do I do it now? It almost felt like I was standing on one side of the Grand Canyon, trying to decide whether or not I would walk that tightrope across to the other side of the Grand Canyon. Is the best way I can describe my frame of thought at that time and place.
Yeah, it's a scary thought, and you definitely get ingrained with a lot of I don't want to say dogma, but you get ingrained with a lot of military jargon, military slang. You get into that lifestyle, you get around people and you're used to that. And to step out of that bubble into another bubble somewhere else is a very scary thought. Plus the fact that, I mean, you were you know, command sergeant major. That's one of those spots where you get there and you're like, well, now what can I do to help the troops? Now what can I do to bring everybody up to this level? And, you know, mentor and teach and guide people. So yeah, stepping away from that in and of itself, I would say is super, super difficult.
Think yourself, at least I thought to myself, you know, man, I really know this thing inside and out, and I really am able to make significant impact in the day-to-day of, you know, Marines all around me, right, within a very large radius. Do I really give that up and try my luck, you know, per se, at becoming a contributing member of society in the private sector now? It is a large leap. It was for me, at least.
What are some of the things that you carry with you now into civilian life that some of those things that you just mentioned about mentoring and guiding people, how are you able to do that in the civilian world, and what tools did you carry over from your time in the Marines to be able to do that?
Yeah, you know, I've found that it is possible to do that and continue to do that, regardless of the organization that you become a part of in the private sector, right? The really cool thing about the private sector is you're not locked into, you know, 4 years at a time or, you know, any period of time. You can kind of transition around based on what you believe to be the best opportunity for you at that time. I found that it really boils down to, at least in my experience, to, you know, being able to garner credibility and then trust. It's a lot easier for folks to open their mind and open themselves up to be able to allow you to influence their decision making or their day-to-day activities. You know, trying to develop a leader organization to be a better leader and have a better impact on the culture and the climate of the organization, or whether it comes down to, you know, an operational change where, you know, you say to yourself, or you say to that individual, you know, business leader, hey, I think we can make widgets a little bit more efficiently if we do X, Y, and Z. And I'm basing that off of my, you know, presence here in the organization and being with the frontline employees and understanding what their challenges and limitations are and their, you know, their constraints are, to be able to, you know, help the organization, you know, be better. So I think really it comes down to, you know, credibility. And in the military, you learn very rapidly, right, that as soon as you join an organization, in order to establish credibility, you have to demonstrate proficiency, and you have to demonstrate an ability and a knowledge of the job or the task at hand. So if you can manage to do that and quickly establish a reputation of credibility because you do the work, you don't mind rolling your sleeves up and being a player coach, you know, as a lot of organizations do these days, because organizations are becoming leaner and leaner, right? They're cutting out a lot of layers of middle management and lower management. So no matter at what level you are in the organization, you've got to be willing to roll your sleeves up and get in and do the work and understand it. And I think that teaches you a couple of things, right? It teaches you the real needs of the organization. It demonstrates the challenges of the frontline employees of the organization. And then it allows you to build that credibility and that trust. So to me, ability to influence when I was still active duty was not automatic in the private sector, because quite frankly, right, people are like, hey man, what's a sergeant major, right? It's not, they're not asking out of malice, they're just asking because what is it exactly that does, or that does, right? So it doesn't translate immediately. So you really have to be good at, you know, demonstrating credibility and then efficiency, or, you know, and then gaining trust. And then that trust allows you to influence folks because it's not automatic, right? My last stop as a Marine, I walked in, had the rank on my collar, and people automatically say, okay, well, he must know what he's doing because he's here, he's in that seat. So, okay, right, we're going to start with a place of trust and say, go ahead, make a decision. The private sector, you come in, yeah, it depends on what role you come in, but you still have to, in order to be able to influence and make decisions.
Do you feel like you, in your experience in the civilian sector, do you feel like you needed to continually explain that over and over, or once you actually built the trust, then you were able to then leverage that trust in order to have people be like, oh, okay, we know you, we know who you are, we know you've been around these circles. Do you feel like you have to like continually like over and over explain to people like, okay, here's the rank structure, here's where I was, this is what I was doing, and basically it equates to this in the civilian world?
I think, you know, are you asking from the perspective of, you know, you're trying to get your foot in the door in an organization, or you're already established in the organization as an employee? I guess I would need to understand what context you'd like me to describe that in.
Yeah, let's take it from both perspectives. Like as you were starting to look for jobs and figure out what path you were going to go down and interviewing and all that stuff. And then once you were in the door, did you feel like you had to then go back over that same kind of routine, that elevator pitch with people whenever they would be maybe someone new to the organization coming in talking to you?
Yeah. So if we start from, you know, when I was trying to get my foot in the door in different organizations, I found that the most critical thing was having my resume actually translated into terms that the private sector can understand, aimed at the role that I was looking to land, right? So I had to quite literally read the job description, take all of my time in the Corps, and create a resume that would translate my skills, experiences, and knowledge for the role. And it never really failed initially when I wasn't doing such a great job of translating. They would ask me, well, what does this mean? Can you tell me what you did in the Corps? So I was fortunate enough, you know, it takes a village, right? So I was fortunate enough to have recruiters who were interested in grabbing veterans and bringing them into their organization, who would reach out to me and say, hey, we've got your resume. Thanks for reaching out on LinkedIn. Let's talk about what you did in the military so that I can better understand the contents of your resume. So in that regard, yeah, I had to explain away quite a bit as I was trying to get my foot in the door. And through repetition, right, through numerous conversations with either a sourcing recruiter or an actual recruiter or a hiring manager, I was able to then fine-tune my ability to clearly draw a line from, I did this in the military, which can then be translated into this, which can help you solve the needs of the organization and the reason that you're trying to fill this role. So definitely necessary as I was trying to figure out where I was going to get put in the door and working with recruiters, et cetera. In the organization itself, certain extent, I believe. You know, my first gig military was the GM of the excavation facility, and I can talk about how I landed that gig. It's an info, right? But that was a fairly straightforward process. And then my second gig, I was at General Atomics. General Atomics is an aerospace and defense organization who has a veteran-heavy population who understood what I did and understood where I was coming. I didn't really have a lot of questions about that. But in my current org, which I've been with for 4 years now, initially I think the questions would come up because folks were trying to contextualize, like, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself because I want to understand what you can do for us, right? Even when you're already in the door. So, you know, I tell them, well, you know, I've been, you know, I was at General Atomics for a little bit. I was a GM of a facility. Prior to that, I was in the military. Oh, tell me about that, right? And I think it came from two places. It came from a place of curiosity, because a lot of folks, you know, may have never served or only had relatives that served and have a a slight understanding of, you know, the military rank structure and the branches and what we do. But then, you know, I think once you establish that foundational base of knowledge amongst the coworkers that are interested in understanding, really it just comes down to, what have you done for me lately, right? Okay, thanks for your service. Thank you for transitioning. Are you proficient in this role? Are you delivering the results that the organization needs? And, you know, quite frankly, at the end of the day, yeah, they appreciate your service, but it doesn't carry a lot of weight if you're not a, you know, a contributing member of the organization to help them achieve their objectives.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's perfect, actually. And you did say something that I really want to touch on and just kind of underscore in the process of interviewing and trying to get your foot in the door, as well as once you had your foot in the door. It sounded, I heard it in a couple different ways as you were talking, that you were always looking to figure out what you can do to fix their problems, like what you can do to solve their issues, or to, you know, make things better or streamline processes, or whatever you can do to add value to that organization. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, organizations are patient, and they're realistic in their expectations. But, you know, at the end of the day, the organization is there to do one thing, right? And that's create value for a customer and drop more money to the bottom line, right? So it's really comes down to, if you're here, we certainly appreciate your service, but what can you do for us today, tomorrow, and the day after to help us continue to grow, continue to be more profitable, and continue to be, you know, an organization that's going to draw more like-minded talent.
Yep, that's perfect. Before we move on, I just want to interject and let Steve jump in if you've got anything. Otherwise, I can move on to the next topic.
Yeah, I'm not really used to a lot of the streaming, so you'll have to forgive me for that. The one thing I've noticed, and you know, different levels. I retired E6 myself, military police, so I've got a little bit more carryover in the resume than somebody, you know, rifleman or somebody like that would have to try and really, you know, dig down and convert their resume into civilian speak. But even with what you've been saying, have you still seen pushback from civilians that just, they don't understand the military, they don't see how it equates, and no matter what you've done or what level you've retired at, they still don't see the value in what you bring?
Yeah, you really have to, you really have to be able to tell the story, I think, because there's different levels of understanding in the private sector about what it is that folks do in the military, either by branch or, you know, whether they're commissioned officers, non-commissioned officers, and then at what level, you know, folks ended up hanging up the uniform and transitioning into the private sector. And I think that there's two things at play that I would say as part of this response. One is those that came before you in that organization, or that, you know, interacted with those folks in your organization. And a lot of those folks that I've met have either very positive or very not so positive impressions of former military members based on their interactions, right? So you have to be able to explain what it is that you were able to do in the organization and in the military apparatus to be able to clearly have those folks understand and get like the full context and the full framework of what it is that you do, right? Because, you know, the military were really good at doing a lot of things while wearing one job description or one job title, right? So that's not something that's very common in the private sector, right? A lot of times it's like, whoa, it's not my job description. Maybe I'm not going to be able to do that for you, right? Thanks for asking, though, boss, but you know, that really doesn't fall into other duties that may be required. Whereas in the military, you're like, oh, another collateral duty? All right, yeah, sure throw it in the pack, and let's keep moving, right? So you've got to be able to really contextualize and provide the framework and, you know, the different conditions under which you're able to do things, because being an MP overseas at a, you know, forward operating base could be a lot different than being an MP at a small base in the garrison side of the house, right? So you've got to be able to tell the stories. You've got to be able to, you know, do it in a way that leaves those folks with full understanding, because I find that to be kind of like a good way to open doors for other veterans behind you. Right? So if you're able to do that, they can say, oh, wait, it doesn't really matter what rank or what level. Let's find out what they could really do. And they learn those things by interacting with folks like us who have already transitioned and can tell those stories in a way that helps them really understand the value that a veteran brings.
And you would, I would say that a good transition point initially is that transition assistance coming out of the military to even start translating your resume at that point.
Yeah, you know, transition assistance program is such a hot topic for me, at least, and I'm sure it's still a hot topic for folks in the DoD. You know, I was not able to go to the transition assistance program until I believe it was 12 months out. Right? I think at the time the policy said, hey, you can go 12 months out, maybe 18 months out, right? What I found is that by the time I started attending the transition assistance program, I had already been working on my transition for about 14 months at that point, right? So if we want to talk about timelines, I think you've got to give yourself ample time, and ample time could mean different things to John, Steve, and Carlos, to be quite honest with you. And here's what I mean by that, right? If you're an air traffic controller in the military and you know you want to be an air traffic controller in the private sector, chances are your transition process and your transition glide path is going to be much, much smoother than a younger Marine or a senior Marine trying to get out and go into something that's completely outside of what their MOS was, right? If I'm a military police officer and I want to become a business development professional, how do I go about doing that, right? Where do I even start? So the 18-month mark might not be sufficient at that point. You might want to back it up a little bit. So I guess to answer your question, then I can move on to timelines if you all want. And from my perspective, I think that you've got to start well before the transition assistance program. The transition assistance program, in my opinion, is the DoD's way of demonstrating in good faith that they're preparing transitioning military members into the military, into the private sector. But in my opinion, DoD probably thinks to themselves, this is not our responsibility. This is likely the Department of Labor's responsibility, which is why you don't see a huge investment in the DoD apparatus for transition assistance program. Because if you think about it, the more we back up transition, the less likely that some of those military members are likely to be contributing to the unit's mission. And as military commanders will tell you, like, hey, I need every pair of boots on the ground to help me accomplish my mission. I know they need to transition, but they're on the hook for providing results based on their unit's mission set. So the transition assistance program is great, but you've got to start well before that.
Sure.
Yep. Yeah, that's it's I won't say it's a hot topic, but it's definitely a topic that we discuss pretty much on every single episode. And again, depending on if you're in the Marines or if you're in the Navy or the Army or the Air Force, like different story from each angle. It is a DoD program, but it's run differently by each organization, meaning each service. I think the Army at some point was 24 months for my transition. And I got there the day before the 24-month mark, and they were like, yeah, you got to come back tomorrow, but yes, you're in the right timeline. So that kind of gave me two different perspectives on it. It was like, oh, okay, cool. I understand that I'm actually on the right timeline for transition assistance. And I also know that yes, indeed, like my time for retirement is going to be somewhat within this scope. So that kind of gave me a little bit of reassurance. But yeah, it's a fire hose of information. We talk about it all the time. We talk about it in our book. And it's good to take a lot of notes, ask a lot of questions. If you're married, if you have a significant other, take them with you so they can take notes and ask a lot of questions, because they're going to have a perspective that you don't have, and they're going to ask questions that you're not going to think of. But yeah, let's definitely dig into timelines, and from your perspective, the timeline that it took, because your job in the Marines, was it HR based or was it not HR based?
Well, you know, you can translate your time as a sergeant major into either HR based or operationally based, depending on the needs of the job. So I felt like it was HR based. But as I mentioned, right, my first gig was as a general manager running a profit and loss for a pet cremation center, right? So I think what allowed me to be able to pivot into each of those was the preparation. So if I backtrack to my transition timeline, right, you know, again, this is talking about, you know, when I was still on active duty. I think back then, the furthest out that you could submit your retirement package was 14 months out, right? So if you can submit it 14 months out for a planned retirement date of, you know, January 31st, like it was in my case in 2020, 14 months out would have probably put me at November of, you know, 2018. Right? And as I mentioned before, I was at TAPS 18 months out, and I was planning before that. So I think if you're going to decide to transition from the military, you have to be able to make that decision probably 30 to 24 months out. And I know it sounds a little bit ludicrous, especially for, you know, the younger folks that are joining the military who come in and they're sitting here saying, wait, you're telling me that after my 2-year mark, I got to start thinking whether or not I'm going to stay in or get out. And the answer is likely, right? Likely, yes. But if you spent your adult life and you need to retire, I would say you need to think about 24 to 36 months out. And it's possible to do both well, right? It's possible to still contribute to your unit's mission and meet the needs of your role in that organization while simultaneously transitioning out, right? So fortunately for me, my last role was at MCRD San Diego, non-deployable, demanding, but non-deployable, right? So it allowed me to work backwards and say, okay, if we're going to commit, have that real serious conversation with my wife at the time, you got to have that significant other's buy-in to say, okay, I think I'm going to get out, and this is when I want to get out, and this is what we're going to do. Once they're on board, then you start your clock, right? And for me, it was about 30 months when I was at that point where I needed to make the decision. So I needed to get my spouse's buy-in for 2 factors. I needed to let her know that I was going to retire and that, you know, we would be no longer, you know, PCSing every 3 summers and, you know, crisscrossing the country. She was all in, and she said, well, as long as we can stay close to the San Diego area, I'm good. I said, all right, right on. We can do that, right? The second piece that I needed her buy-in on was helping her understand that I was going to get a part-time job on top of my very demanding full-time job. And she's like, wait a minute, time out. What do you mean a part-time job? I said, transitioning is going to be a part-time job. She said, well, what do you mean by that? I said, look, I'm going to come home about 6:30 p.m. after work every night. And then I've got to either jump on networking calls or I've got to jump on LinkedIn and spend time there, not allowing the LinkedIn algorithm to punish me by not being present, right? And then I've got to attend networking events in person. And I've got to explore other avenues of transition programs, because the great thing is that there are a ton of transition programs out there, right? The USO has transition specialists, which I visited. There was a little bit of value to be drawn from there, right? You've got TAP. There's a little bit of value to be drawn for that. There was, oh my God, I can't remember the name of it, but, you know, they partnered me up with a gentleman from Amgen who happened to be a former Marine who was a, you know, TA professional in their organization to provide me with transition advice, et cetera. And then my favorite, which I still volunteer with, is CTAP, Veterans Career Transition Assistance Program. Janice Whitaker and Betsy Sheets, they do a phenomenal job. Them and their entire team. This is a nonprofit organization that takes you through a very demanding course. It's a number of weeks in length, and you're required to do all of the work that they assign you in order to receive your graduation certificate and be considered an alum of the program, right? That program does everything from, interview prep to resume prep to, recommendations on wardrobe, recommendations on understanding, the industries, the companies, et cetera, et cetera. And I still volunteer with them to this very day because I find them to be such a valuable resource. Yep, that's them right there. Yeah. So, as I was moving through this process, I found myself really living up to what I told my wife about having a part-time job. Like, I would literally get home, I'd have a quick dinner, I'd go upstairs and shower. I'd say, okay, I'm out the door. I'm going to a networking event here, or, a biotech industry event. All right, cool. And then 2 weeks later or a few days later, I'd be like, hey, I'm going to go to this, HR networking event. Okay, cool. Right. And I really needed that support, and she was willing to give it to me. And it allowed me to really, really put all of my cards on the table, really draw out what I thought would be a map for transition that suited me. And I think it's important to say here that everyone's transition is going to be unique. My timeline is simply a recommendation based on my experience. But, Steve and John and Tom and Mary's timeline may be completely different based on what they want to do. You have to find what works for you, and then you have to really leverage your network. And then you have to understand that different folks are going to be accomplishing different things at different times throughout that timeline. And you shouldn't beat yourself up because we're so used to, as a military member, keeping up with our peers, right? You know who your contemporaries were, and, you kind of get promoted at the same time. You go to the same assignments, whether they're prestigious or not, or high visibility or not, around the same time. So you have this natural desire and this natural hardwired mechanism to say, well, if John just landed a gig, why haven't I landed a gig? What's wrong with me, right? Hey, Steve landed one the day after John. What am I doing wrong, right? And I found myself doing that when I attended the DoD SkillBridge program. When I attended, it was a 90-day program, and I was an intern with a large organization. And we would go back to our huddles, and somebody would say, well, hey, I just landed a gig. I'm going to make this much. And, somebody else would say, hey, I landed this gig. I'm going to make this much. And I would sit there and say, you need to hurry up. And I started feeling that pressure, right? You need to step it up. You need to land something. You need to land it now. And it needs to pay you X much because your contemporaries are making X much. And to the point, and I'm totally okay saying this, I thought, should I go and ask Headquarters Marine Corps to let me withdraw my papers and just stick around another 7, right? Like that's how much artificial pressure you can create for yourself if you're trying to see your transition process as a military process where it's very deliberate, it's very, straightforward, and it's, these are the things you need to do to accomplish it. And if you do them, you'll accomplish it. Like, this is very, very unique for all of us. And I think you need to give yourself the time and space necessary, leverage your network, and most importantly, understand that your transition journey is yours and yours alone. There are no two transitions that are similar because everyone is different. Your goals are different. You come from a different military background. You might want to live in Alabama where I want to live in San Jose. If you want to get a tech job in Alabama, well, you might struggle a little bit more than if you're living in San Jose, right? So your journey is yours. Your timeline has to be pretty large, but you have to use that time wisely as well.
Yeah, and I feel like based on what you just said, I feel like it's more beneficial to the military organization if you start to plan out 24, 36, 48 months ahead of time, because you give yourself enough runway to make mistakes along the way, wait for somebody to process paperwork, wait on somebody to call you back, all those little hiccups that you know, when we plan in the military, we're like, okay, we're going to go from point A to point B to point C, and it's going to take this much time, and we execute, and it's perfect every time, right? But in the real world, in the context of the real world, that's not the way life works. Like, we think it's a straight line and it's very linear, and it's actually just this weird curvy scribbly line that goes in all directions all the time. And then couple that with things going on at the house, and you've got to fix the car, and the AC broke down, and like all these things that happen in life that kind of throw monkey wrenches at you. So yeah, taking the time to come back, you know, 24, 36, 48 months. And that's kind of like one of the main key things of this whole conversation and discussion and interview process here, is to get people to understand, like, we're not telling you you got to start at 48 months. Like, there's no set in stone thing. Like you said, everybody's transition is different,
Right.
but you need to at least consider it. You need to at least start thinking about it. You need to at least take it into consideration and say, okay, well, what would it look like if I started at 48 months? This is really what I want to do. I'm trying to make this decision. Maybe you change your mind at the very last month and just retract your paperwork, right? You can do that. You can retract it. You don't have to like put in the request to get retirement or put in the request to get out and then have to go through with it. Like, you can stop and say, hey, maybe I just want to stay in for another year or 2 years, right? You don't have to commit to that. But you do definitely have to try to set things up so that you're giving yourself enough space and enough opportunity to succeed in whatever path you end up on, even if that path means that you retract everything that you started doing, you know, 2 years ago, and say, okay, well, you know what, I'm just going to keep the uniform on. This is a really good gig. I'm getting paid. They're taking care of my housing, like all this stuff. And I'll figure it out in a couple more years when I've got a better headspace and something like that. I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about timelines, for your particular timeline, was there any point, I know you said there was a point where you were thinking about retracting your paperwork. Was there any other points in there where you were kind of uncertain about things, or didn't really know and you were on shaky ground? And how did you actually get yourself out of that mental rut, if you did experience anything else like that?
Yeah, so I think it really started to become a stressful situation when I was at the 6-month mark. You know, I was doing the internship. I was listening to folks say, hey, I landed this gig, I landed this gig, I landed this gig. And I was thinking to myself, man, I really need to step it up, right? This is not going to work. This is not going to work. I miss the security of being, you know, in the military, and, you know, it might not be harmful to stick around a little bit longer. Two things that really helped me, and I think are very critical, is, you know, I sat back and I reflected a little bit on what is it that we, you know, say that we can bring to the private sector as veterans, right? We bring grit, we bring determination, we bring a work ethic that's unparalleled. You know, we have these leadership traits and principles that we learn to live and lead by, and they become a norm, right? So in those periods of retrospection, when I was thinking to myself, man, am I really going to be cut out to leave the Corps after so many years? I think what I ended up coming to the conclusion of, it was like, listen, you're advertising these intangible traits to potential employers, so you need to, you know, really start tapping into them and rely on those to walk you through this process, right? We're fortunate enough as military members where we really learn how to deal with, you know, uncertain situations. We learn how to overcome obstacles. We learn how to get things done, even with limited resources or when timelines are extremely tight. So, you know, I kind of had to give myself a pep talk on numerous occasions to say, if you're saying you can bring this to the table, then don't just talk about it, walk the talk as well. and then, you know, shake yourself off and get it done, right? That was part one. Part two, and what was I found to be very, very important and very beneficial to my transition, is my battalion XO decided that he was going to retire too, right? So his office was right next door to mine. So we decided to become transition buddies. And we found that that was a very critical piece of the equation for us that nobody really talked about, at least not in the circles that we were running, right? So he and I, our transition timeline ended up being about, you know, 4 or 5 months difference, right? And so we spent the last 2 years working together, you know, solving the problems of the organization, helping our commander, you know, achieve their mission, and, you know, enabling and empowering the members of the organization to be better and to be productive members of the Corps, right? We decided to become transition buddies to do the same for each other, right? So whenever he was going to an event, he would say, "Hey man, I've heard of this thing called SD Mac. Have you been to this thing?" No, I haven't. So we'd go to, you know, some transition event that he found, right? Or I would say, "Hey John, are you familiar with Vet CTAP?" "No, I'm not." "Oh, I just completed it. I think you need to complete it too," right? So then he would go and complete it. So it became very synergistic, and it helped both he and I to really get out of our own head, right? And start to really say, okay, let's hone in, let's focus. We've done a lot of things in our existence as Marines. We can certainly transition to the private sector after, you know, 23 years respectively that I pulled and he pulled. And that really, for me, was what brought it over the top for me. I was able to then contextualize the conversations I was having with myself about, hey, man, you've got to really live up to the things that you're saying, that you know, those intangible qualities that you learned in your time in active duty. And then, you know, with John at my side, I was able to really have somebody to lean on because he understood exactly what I was going through. Your spouse can, to a certain degree, understand what you're going through, right? But nobody understands a transitioning veteran situation more so than a transitioning veteran who also happens to be, you know, of, you know, similar tenure, similar experiences, similar aspirations post-military. To me, and you know, John may tell you the same thing, having a transition buddy really is what brought it over the top for us and enabled us to really dial in and push through even when we thought, man, should I redact those papers and just stick around for another 7 more years? It doesn't sound so bad now, right? But it really was beneficial.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. That's one of the, I mean, this is the first time I've actually really thought about it. And it's kind of what I did with the podcast. Like, I found Victor, and me and Victor hit it off, and we've been attacking it ever since. And it's been much better and much more enjoyable. The process of doing the interviews, of setting things up, of gathering information, doing research, trying to find information for veterans to put out there in forms of videos and audio files. But that's probably a super obvious thing that I think not anybody else has ever talked about and ever brought up and discussed. And it's funny because it's what we're taught at the very beginning when we come in, like, stick with your battle buddy, stick with your battle buddy. Where are you going? Why don't you have a battle buddy? Wow. That's for those of you out in the audience listening or watching, this is a foot stomp moment. I wish I had a foot stomp button on my keyboard right now. Yeah, that's a profound insight, because I mean, I had something close to that, but we were retiring around the same time, a lieutenant colonel that I worked with, and she actually gave me some insights and stuff as I was going through the process. And I helped her out with a couple of things as well. But yeah, I've never really made the connection with that. That's incredible advice. And it just happened to work out because you just happened to work in the office store, right? So luck of the draw, but in hindsight, made all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and you said it yourself, right? Like, John and I were sitting there staring at each other one day, talking through something work related. And he said, well, how's your transition going? Man, I don't know, right? And he looked at me and said the same thing and said, you know what? We need to start collaborating. We need to start doing this on a buddy system. I mean, you know, and it just naturally clicked because, like, much like you just said, we completely overlooked that. We were like, literally, there was one singular wall separating John's office from my office in the battalion headquarters, and we never thought to, you know, tear down that wall and say, hey, man, we're going to do this thing together because our timelines are so close. Our time in the Corps is so similar. And he was also a prior enlisted Marine. So, you know, we had a lot of a similar, you know, approach to things. So it just made complete sense. And whenever I was feeling down and I was like, I don't want to go to that event, I never get anything out of it, this networking thing's getting old, he would say, no, you're going, go get your stuff and let's go, and vice versa. And it really, really did help because it adds a layer of accountability too, right? Like I could go home and tell my wife, oh, there's nothing on the calendar today for networking, right? But John knew. He'd be like, no, we're going, and I'll see you there at 7. Like, all right, see you there, and it really helped.
Did you happen to? I don't know how you were personally with John, but did you happen to find out that along the way, maybe your spouse? I don't know if he was married or not. Maybe your spouses collectively kind of saw that thing that you were doing and maybe kind of replicated it between the two of them?
They were very familiar with what we were doing, but no, they never made that connection. But I think there would be value there if they would have, right? Because by the time John and I, so in my mind, right, there's like 3 very important swim lanes that you have to keep in mind as you're transitioning, right? Where am I going to live?
Mm-hmm.
What am I going to do for a living? And by the way, that I take care of all my VA stuff, right? So those are the 3 like main lines of operation that I think when I think transitioning. Very broad stroke, but you know, if you create those 3 buckets, you can kind of figure it out. So the reason my spouse and John's spouse didn't really connect in that manner was because John and I had already decided where we were going to live, and I think that is primarily the biggest challenge maybe for, you know, the spouses of transitioning vets to see like how can we connect with other spouses and make that happen. So no, they didn't connect, but I think it would be valuable to do that because that also creates an additional net in the network where you can then rely on them and have them help you walk through some of those difficult decisions that you're making. And now it's not just 2 people that buddied up, it's 4 people that are buddied up, and 4 minds are definitely better than 2 and definitely better than 1. So I could see that being a very positive thing.
Incredible. Incredible. I'll pass it to you, Steve, real quick. Otherwise we can move on to another topic.
Yeah, no, the whole buddy thing really, that really hits home. I know I retired 15 years ago, and you know, I didn't have this background at all. We went to command referred TAPs. We had 2 weeks of death by PowerPoint. We get done at the end of the day, we're back to the ship and we're back to normal life. And the process then was, so not the same. And so, you know, we weren't really working with each other on getting out. We were getting back and thinking, oh my God, how did we get through that PowerPoint without killing ourselves? And, you know, it didn't really help. So when you actually stepped out of boots, the whole thing was completely new. And you were on your own and you'd completely lost that. And that's what I felt the last 15 years. I've still got some of my buddies that I talk to, but for the most part, you know, we've really drifted to our own islands, and it's something that's really been difficult in transition.
Yeah, and if I can, Carlos, just to pull on that thread a little bit further, now that you've retired and you've been out for a while, do you still stay in contact with John? Do you guys still buddy up on things as far as like job stuff or, you know, brainstorming or just sitting down and having a conversation, anything like that?
Yeah. So in fact, John and I speak almost weekly about, you know, what's next or how things are going. And, you know, we'll compare notes with regard to fellow vets or that are already transitioned or active duty members that are going to be transitioning about, whether or not there's an opportunity for them at my organization or his organization. Have we recommended the right transition program to them? That kind of thing. So it does carry over. And interestingly enough, John and I, my transition was first. I ended up at that company with the cremation services. Well, guess where John's first post-military gig was? Same company, right? He was on the supply chain side and I was on the GM side, right? So to this day, we're still both advocating for each other. We're keeping our eyes open for each other. And it really cemented a different kind of bond, right? Like, you all are both prior military. You know that there's different bonds with different folks that you serve with along the way, right? If you were in really, really terrible situations together, that's one type of bond. If you were just a regular garrison assignment together, that's a different kind of bond. If you were, you name it, right? So with John and I, we created this bond where we went through this thing, this transition thing, which is, you got to cross that chasm, right? Standing on one side of the canyon and trying to get over to the other side, right? We went through it together. Yep. We went through it together, and we have that bond now where I'm always checking on him. Hey, are you still happy there? Are you still looking for something? If you see something for me, let me know, that kind of thing. It's really been beneficial for us.
That's beautiful. All right. Let me look at the time. Yeah, we're pretty good. Let's, if you're good, we're good. We'll continue on. I do want to hit on this one last thing that you mentioned in the notes in the email back and forth about networking, support network versus professional network, and what that means and why it's important.
Yeah. So, I think it really does come back to when things get dark and stormy as you're transitioning, right? And I think, speaking for myself again, right, I think that there were times when I was like, man, this is difficult. This is nearly impossible, right? So the professional network on LinkedIn and the folks that you work with and you leverage to try to find opportunities or speak to people that may be able to open doors for you, et cetera, that's great and all, right? But in order to be in the right mindset to have those discussions with the professional network, with people that you're networking with, or recruiters or hiring managers, whatever the case may be, you've got to be in the right state of mind as well, right? So the support network to me is things like what I mentioned with John being my transition buddy. Like, that's what we were, that's what we became, and that helped, right? The support network at Vet CTAP, the way that they do the classes, it's a cohort, and then all of the volunteers are still available to you, and they assign you a mentor. I was very fortunate to have a good cohort that I was able to bounce notes off of and speak to. And guess how I landed my second gig at General Atomics? One of the fellows in that cohort, right? He happened to be at General Atomics. There was an opportunity. The sourcing recruiter reached out to me, and then the rest was history. I was an employee at General Atomics. But, that support network, it should have the ability to put you back in the right frame of mind so that you can continue to do both, right? Because the transition piece is huge, right? You've got to find gainful employment that's suitable for you and your skill set and the lifestyle that your family is accustomed to, while you're still working on solving, very complex problems almost on the daily in the military organization, right? So you're doing that. And then you also have your family life, who, you've got a spouse, you've got kids, they've got, things that go on in their life that you still have to be present for. So I think the support network is very important because it serves as a form of a well where you can go and recharge, right? Whether it be emotionally, whether it be spiritually, whatever it is that you need to get you in the right mindset so that you can be on the playing field day in and day out until you score that first gig, and then you can kind of continue to grow from there.
Yeah, it's excellent. I like that that's equated to, or at least in my mind, is equated to frame of mind, support network, frame of mind, with the equal sign in between. because it's really the foundation, the fundamental starting point, whether you're transitioning out of the military, whether you're dealing with mental health issues, whether you're dealing with problematic things at home, if you're going through a divorce, if you've, anything that you're dealing with in life. I feel like it starts from that mental frame of mind. And I feel like that's a great way to kind of encapsulate that inside of that term support network. And it's also something that we do in the military as well. Like we have the professional side of the military, where we do our jobs and the people we work with. And then we have the support side of the military, where it's the people who we spend time with after work. It's our spouses and loved ones, putting together, organizational days and car washes and family events for the family members and the service members both. So, and I like that that's a kind of a jumping off springboard from that, setting the mindset straight, and then using that as a leverage point to then drive career choices, financial decisions, anything else that comes after that. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and for me, in addition to the entirety of the support network, as I mentioned earlier, I was very fortunate to this day, actually, throughout my entire career in the military and to this day, to have a very supportive spouse, right? So she's been there through all of it, thick and thin. And then when I sat her down and said, hey, I'm going to transition, I'm going to hang up the uniform and I'm going to work part-time, and my part-time gig is going to be my transition. You've got to have that. Like, that person that sits next to you day in and day out and understands you the most needs to be there, because, it's yet again, right? Another accountability mechanism. Hey, dude, you're burning out. Take a break today. Hey, man, why are you pouting? Hey, what's going on, right? So, like, you've got to have that. So whomever is going to be closest to you, you have to be very deliberate and very straightforward and an open book and say, this is what transition could potentially mean for me. This is how long that runway is going to likely be. It's not going to be easy at every turn, and I need your support, and let's get it done, right? And that's also very critical, to have that person that sits with you side by side, day in and day out, who understands you and can help keep you accountable. Having them bought in and having them fully understand what it is that you're about to enter into is extremely beneficial as well.
Yeah. And not only that, I'll just add this onto it. Like, not only that, but also being able to tell them straightforwardly, like, hey, I just told you all this stuff, but I could also be completely wrong about everything I just told you. So let's just keep that on the table as well. And then being understanding enough and like supportive enough to be like, okay, I got it. It's going to be a mess. We'll figure it out. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'll pass the
great point.
to Steve.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the biggest hurdle that I see with myself, but with a lot of others, is we're so ingrained that you work as a team, but you also are dependable on yourself. And then when you get out, if you don't have that network, you don't realize it until something happens necessarily, because you're pushing through for yourself. You're dependent on yourself because that's the way you've learned for however many years, 20 plus or whatever. And then when it hits, things snowball at that point, and you don't realize what you're missing until that happens. I know that, for me, that's one thing that I've noted, and it's, something I'm trying to rectify, but, sometimes it's a little late, hopefully not always too late, but something that, I think people transitioning need to realize, don't let that go, even though your transition to civilian life is going to be so different from what it was when you were military.
Yeah, I agree. You've got to be able to tap to those folks that understand what it's like to be an active duty military member, or military member, whether active duty or not, right? But you've got to be able to tap into that network, because it's just, again, right, to me, it's an ability to, bring yourself to a place, whether it be mentally or emotionally, to where you're ready to get back on the field and play again, right? And sometimes that just may mean it's a quick text to somebody that you used to serve with, who understands you and understands the things that you've done and experienced. And, you know, it could be something just that simple. You have to keep that support network around you, and you've got to be part of it too, right? You've got to be active in that too. I think that's really the important piece too, right? Is you've got to be an active participant in that. You've got to give in order to take. And I think that, you know, sometimes when I reach out to somebody that I haven't reached out to in a long time, say, hey man, haven't heard from you in a minute. Just want to check in, make sure you're good. Let me know if you need anything, right? And that to me opens another door for someone to be able to, you know, reach out to me just like I can reach out to them.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to kind of bring it to a conclusion and bring it to a wrap because I want to respect your time. I know we've been on here for a little over an hour. I don't want to drag this on for 3 or 4 hours. We can if you want to, but I just want to open it up for anything else that we may have missed, any topics that we may not have discussed, anything that's really in the forefront of your mind that you would like to talk about real quick, and then we can go ahead and put some information out there about how people can contact you.
Sure. You know, I think that as you're navigating your transition, and if you stick to some of those basic tips, right, like find yourself a transition buddy. I think that's probably the most important thing you can do is find yourself a transition buddy. No matter if you've pulled 4, 8, 28 years, find yourself a transition buddy who shares similar experiences in the military with you, who can help keep you accountable, and you can help them keep themselves accountable, right? You're keeping yourself accountable to you, but you need some assistance, and that's always good, right? Don't overlook the value of networking opportunities. You know, there are a ton out there. There are too many to name out right here, right? And there's always a networking opportunity that's available. Find them, talk to people. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And it's uncomfortable, right? And you're going to get it wrong. Look, I went to my first job fair with John, my transition buddy, at Petco Park, right? And, you know, we put on our chinos and a nice long sleeve shirt, and we had resumes and a little, you know, folder in a folio case. And we're walking around this event. It's a hiring event at Petco Park. And so I see a company that I think I'm interested in, right? And I run over there, and there's 2 recruiters sitting behind the table. And without anything more than a hello, I unloaded my elevator speech on them. And when I got done, they both kind of looked at me and looked at each other and looked back at me, and they're like, thanks. Here's the jobs that we have open. None of them match what you just said, but take a look, right? So don't be afraid to make mistakes. You know, you're going to learn. It's repetition. So find all of the networking that you can do. Network with people. Be open to meet new people and to hear new perspectives. And that is where you're going to maximize your potential for your post-military employment or gig or whatever it is that you want to do. It's tough. It was tough for me, right? I was never really like super out there, but you have to learn to do that, and you have to learn to market yourself. As military members, we always say we, right? We always say we, like my team and I did this, the team completed that. We attribute credit for things that go well to the team, and we always are willing to take on the responsibility for things that go wrong, right? When things go well, look at the team. When things go bad, look in the mirror. And we're very accustomed to that. We need to do a better job of selling ourselves to potential employers. I did this. I accomplished this. And it's very difficult to do initially. Selfish, and you're stealing credit away from those that served alongside you to help you accomplish that. But really, you have to market yourself, and you have to be able to tell the story of what value you brought to the organization, what that meant for the organization, and what the organization was able to accomplish because you were there. And trust me, you accomplished a lot. As a transitioning veteran, you've accomplished a lot. you have to take the time to write it down and be able to tell a story to a potential employer in a way that helps them understand and see, yep, I can understand why Joe would be great on our team, not just because they're military service or their pay grade at the time or their rank at the time, but because they were able to tell me what they did and, more importantly, what they can do for me to help me solve the business problems that I'm dealing with today. It's not being selfish. It's just marketing yourself. And trust me, those folks that helped you get to where you are will be even happier for you when you land your post-military employment, and they're not caring that you said me or I did this or I accomplished this. They're going to be happy for you. So don't feel like you're being selfish or disingenuous when you're selling yourself to a potential employer.
Perfect. Beautiful. I love it. Is there anywhere that you would want to point folks to if they want to reach out to you, get in contact with you, say hi, drop a message, say thank you? Should we go with LinkedIn or anywhere else that you would want to send them to?
Yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way. I try to stay active on there, and I definitely, respond, especially to veterans when they reach out asking for insights or asking for networking. I have no issue with a cold connection request from a military transitioning military member or a military veteran for that matter, who says, "Hey man, I'd like to connect with you. I'd like to maybe network with you or get some time with you to ask you some further questions." Totally.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll drop it in the comments here on the live stream. If you're watching this after the live stream is over, you'll definitely see it in the show notes or on the podcast on audio. You'll see it in the show notes as well. So that'll be out there. I can actually throw it on the screen too, if that makes sense. Let me just do that real quick.
I think we might have lost Carlos there at the end.
Yeah, maybe. That's good though. I mean, we got to the end, right? It's all good, Carlos. If you're not able to get back on, brother, I'll give him a second to see if he can hop on, and if not, then we'll just pull him off the screen. But I will throw the LinkedIn down there in the bottom if you're watching this on video, or if you happen to be on your TV watching this. Yeah, he popped off. No biggie. You can screenshot that. You can also check the link in the description for Carlos's LinkedIn. It's Carlos Gallardo 1 on LinkedIn. So with that, I think that was a great place to stop. I'm glad the connection stayed good for an hour and 15. That was really optimal, really good. So yeah, Carlos, just if you can hear us or see us after the fact, of course, I'm going to reach out to you personally and let you know. But thank you for being with us here. Thank you for sharing your insights. I took away a lot of good notes, as I always do. And that battle buddy thing is now bouncing around in my head. I can't unsee that. So I definitely see something really valuable there in that, and that's something that we haven't really discussed and hasn't come up on the show and hasn't been a talking point really. But it's just maybe because it's just so obvious, and those are the kind of things that you got to kind of keep an eye out for. You find the obvious solution that you wouldn't sit down and like brainstorm over for 6 hours trying to figure out because you're already doing it. But yeah. That's incredible. But yeah, with that, I'll let everybody get back to your day. Thank you, Steve, for coming on, helping out, being co-host today. Very gracious of you to spend your time with us all the time, whether it's here or whether it's in the chat or whether it's in the Facebook group. If you haven't checked us out on Facebook, you should go check us out, the Military Retirement Group. It's a private group. We hand screen every single person that comes in there, so we have no bots. We have no malicious intent actors in there doing anything. And the community is really supportive, really great, a really great bunch of people talking about some interesting topics and having some really good discussions about things. If you're looking for us on the internet, you can find us obviously here if you're watching the live. If you're watching this after the fact or listening to it after the fact, We are on YouTube at the Military Retirement Podcast. Victor has a separate channel called the Green Logbook. You can check that out. That's his private journey of his transition and his thoughts and ideas about transitioning from the military and adjusting to civilian life after the fact. We are on most of the other socials. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook, of course, I just mentioned. We are on Twitter. Not so super active on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, but we do have a presence out there. So if you want to check us out, hit us up, drop us a message. If you really want to support the show, the best thing you can do is, especially if you're watching this on your TV, put on the TV, let it play. If you've got time to sit down through the whole thing and want to sit and spend an hour with us, that's awesome. If you don't have the time, or if you're cooking, or if you're doing laundry or doing something in between, just let it play to the end. And what that does is that kicks the algorithm in the tail and tells it, hey, you should push this out to more people who are looking for military retirement, military transition. It basically just helps this get into the hands of other folks who may not have seen or heard of us yet, and allow them to get in on the action and participate and get some good advice and information. For everybody out there, thank you for watching, tuning in, listening, staying with us. We really, really appreciate your support. Be kind to yourself and to others, and remember to stay safe out there. We'll talk to you later.